Sunday, everyone, and welcome to Our Issues Birmingham. Today's guest is Carrie Wimberly. She is the Executive Director of the Addiction Prevention Coalition. And from now on, that will be referred to in this show as the APC. Welcome to our show, Carrie.
Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Well, it's sort of odd how I stumbled into your organization that I didn't know even existed until I heard about an event you were having recently. And Judge Shantae Owens, who is, I guess, on your board, I'm not sure exactly what her position is, reached out to me through one of your workers to see if I would be interested in helping with that event, and I did. And so tell us who you are and what APC is.
Great. So I'm Carrie Wimberly, as you said, and I'm the Executive Director of the Addiction Prevention Coalition. We are a nonprofit in Birmingham, and we've been around about 14 years.
Wow.
We are the organization was originally founded for a resource directory by a family whose son was struggling with substance use, and they had a really hard time finding resources. So once he was doing better, they formed this organization to help families and to help people connect to the resources they need. And that's certainly the same thing we do today. We just do a lot more besides that. We primarily focus on awareness, prevention, and connection. And the event that you just mentioned is really our signature awareness event. It's the End Addiction Birmingham Walk that's held early in the spring, February, March. And that is an event that draws between 3,000 and 4,000 people downtown Birmingham. We had over 50 resources there. Families come out, people that have lost loved ones to substance use come, people in recovery, people looking for resources, and then just people that are supporting the cause. So thank you so much for being a part of that. But that's awareness. Prevention is really what we spend the bulk of our time on. And that's something that people don't really know about or understand. So that is trying to work on the catalyst issues that lead to substance use and misuse. So that's a lot of education. We do programs in workplaces, community organizations. Our favorite thing to do is to work with students in the high schools in Birmingham City and Jefferson County. Those are groups that are peer-led and adult supervised. And those students come and we train them on how to facilitate groups, on all kinds of drugs and alcohol information, how to lead prevention education in their schools and in their communities. And that's one of the favorite things we do. We also do continuing education with healthcare professionals, nurses, and social workers around all kinds of issues dealing with substance use, prevention and treatment and recovery, sober living, and a lot of other things. So that's a big answer to your question.
No, it's a good answer to my question. So you're proactive in getting into these areas that you just mentioned, specifically the schools. You mentioned workplace. I know there are issues in the medical field, and I'm not trying to diss anybody, but they are around substances that are abused. And when I say substances, the opioid crisis, brutal, which led to a heroin crisis, which everybody had good intentions. Let's make it harder to get opioids. And then all of a sudden, we made it easier to get heroin. And then fentanyl snuck its ugly head in there.
Well, and the pandemic has really, caused that to even increase. Lots of reasons for that. We've seen so much more, use and overdose rates, the supply of fentanyl and the street drugs was reduced. And so a lot more has been produced in the US, and it's more potent. So you're seeing a lot more deaths in that area. That's one of the reasons that we started that event that we just had a few weeks ago, because we do Narcan training there, and that is what people use to reverse an opioid overdose.
Right.
So that's one of the biggest things we do with our education is letting people know that is everybody should be trained on Narcan, because you don't know, you could be at a party, at a workplace, and somebody have an opioid overdose, and it can be reversed with just that nasal spray. So we do encourage people, all they have to do is go to the Jefferson County Department of Health website. It's a 7-minute online training. You can take that, fill in your information, and they'll actually send you a Narcan kit.
Wow. Now, recently, since you brought this up, we've gotten a new little stick to test fentanyl.
That's right.
Which was like, everybody's like going, wait a minute, we're going to give these people that are addicted to this substance a way to check it?
That's right.
Explain to the viewing public why that's not a bad thing.
Yes. Okay, so it's called fentanyl test strips. And basically, you kind of have to change your framework of what you're thinking. Harm reduction is critically important in this arena. And that means that the people that are addicted to substances, that are buying street drugs, it is our goal to keep those people alive and ready, so that when they are in the place that they're ready to go to treatment, they can go to treatment. So we want to be prepared and to help them check their drugs to make sure that there's not fentanyl in them. And I know that's a new way of looking at it, but it's so critically important for us to help keep these folks alive that are struggling and suffering from substance use disorder, so they can get treatment later.
We'll follow up on that after break. Don't go away. This is Our Issues Birmingham. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. I'm talking with Carrie Wimberly about addiction prevention, a critical topic. Sometimes good intentions end up with bad results. And I'm confident that we don't disagree that restricting access to opioids, I don't even think it solved that problem, quite frankly, because they're still out there. But it also created other problems with other substances. So let's pretend like I'm a parent and I have, most importantly, a child who has this substance abuse issue. I can bring the child to the water, but I can't make the child drink, so to speak. So tell us what a person like me with a child like that in a hypothetical situation would do to gain help from you.
Okay, that is a great question. And
take your time.
I'm so glad you asked. So I have 5 children, and 2 of our 5 adult children have struggled significantly with substance use disorder. Both of them were using heroin by the time they were out of high school.
Wow.
So this has been a 20-year journey for me and my family, and something I can speak to personally. So first of all, on our website, apcbham.org, there are resources there for both sets of parents. Parents whose children are not using, but they have young children and they want to learn how to educate them all along the way, from kindergarten all the way through college age. It's so critically important for parents to know and be able to talk with authority, because it's factual about substance use. So our website has a parent toolbox with tons of resources about having conversations with your children from a very young age all the way through. So I encourage parents, go out there, and grandparents, go out there, take a look and read that and become educated. For parents that are struggling, have children struggling with substance use, we have another page on our website that says, "Why Won't They Stop?" is the title of it. And it has a lot of resources there that include resources for the parents themselves. We host meetings called Parents of Addicted Loved Ones. There's a Monday night meeting in Shelby County, a Thursday night meeting in Vestavia, where we come together as parents and talk about the issues that our children are facing and learn how to parent in this very difficult situation. There is not a one size fits all on this, and it's not something that most parents are prepared to deal with. So I encourage parents to reach out, get help, call us at our office. We have a peer support specialist here. We also have a parent support specialist that can talk to you in person. I encourage you to come out to these groups because these in-person meetings are critical. But also on that website are lots of resources for parents to get assessments for their children, to look for treatment centers, and also learn how to deal with children that are using but are not ready to get help, which is a really difficult space to navigate. You need support. You need a counselor for the family and for the child.
And you
So
have
it's
access.
complex.
You have access to those things.
Yes,
You know
we would love to help.
what you mentioned in one instance is proactive, and which is the preventative step you mentioned, where you start early, get through high school, even before high school, and in college, and now they're on their own. And the other is reactive, because it's already happened. I just know as a parent, the pain and suffering and anxiety and depression probably that comes with not knowing whether or not that child is going to be alive the next day. So I still get back to the user. Do you sometimes have to just let go? And they talk about the bottom. There's a lot of talk about the bottom. Do you get to that point? Is that part of your process?
It's very interesting. And they're changing language a little bit around the bottom because they're learning that not every child, not every person has to have a bottom experience to get to the place that they're willing to seek help. Some do. So what we try to do is educate and equip the parent so that they can recognize and help them get to that place as much as you can as a parent. You can't take responsibility, but there is definitely a season of letting go in that you cannot control their behavior.
Yeah.
Because people do not understand, it truly is a disease. And once they are in addiction, it is a brain issue.
Yes.
So it's not a choice at that point. So that's part of the education that's really critical for parents and family members to have, to understand where their child is and the continued use and the reasons behind that, because that directs your interaction.
I want to follow up with that when we come back from break. Don't go away. Carrie Wimberly, very good stuff. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. Talking to Carrie Wimberly about a tremendously serious and devastating social problem that exists not just in our community, but in many communities, almost, I would say, nationwide. So you mentioned something about a disease. I think people don't understand that there's a receptor in the brain of some people that creates this craving or this addiction, and we're working on ways to not allow that craving to happen, and that's medically induced. But I had a young client tell me one time, and his issue was alcohol, that addiction was the only disease that a person has where you get screamed at for having. If you had heart disease or cancer, you'd be coddled. They'd bring in experts. So I think there has been a shift and a recognition of the not just the genetic component to that brain dysfunction, but you have to be engaged in educating people on the fact that it's not just rebellious behavior.
That's right.
In every
Yes.
instance. Now, in some instances, it is, but are you addressing that?
Yeah. So,
Is
we
that-
like to say it's a choice that sometimes leads to a disease. And yes, that is a huge part of what we do. Thank you for bringing that up. And that is breaking of stigma. Because at this point, only 10% of people reach out and get help for a substance use issue before some sort of crash. Only 10%. And that is because of stigma and shame, exactly what you described. And our job, that as we see it, is to educate people about the disease component and the brain component. And I'll give you an example. My oldest son, who has struggled, and thank goodness he's sober, and we haven't lost either one of our sons, which we're one of the lucky families. He described to me the first time he took an opioid, and he said it was a feeling of euphoria. Okay, like this is the way I'm supposed to have felt my whole life. Okay, when I take an opioid, I feel horrible. And that is the difference of the receptor in our brain. And that's part of the communication and the education we like to give parents of young children as they grow. If you happen to have a child that has a sports injury or a wisdom teeth extraction and they get their first opioid, you want to have a conversation with them about how that made them feel. Because if they have that euphoric response, that's going to be a struggle for them in the future. Being able to have that conversation is so critically important.
Yep, communication. So, is there a cost factor involved for people reaching out to you?
No, we are a nonprofit. All of our services are completely free. We have all kinds of education. We have webinars that we have done in the past that are available to view. All of our resources are there. Again, everything is free. So we would love to help families out there in any way that we possibly can.
Is the webinar open to the world? Anybody that wants to tune in?
Yes.
How do you get the word out other than I'm going to put the word out?
Thank you so much.
When are your webinars? Are they?
Okay, so we're running a series right now for parents, and that it's called Why Won't They Stop? It's a series of webinars, one a month on Wednesday evenings. You can find all of that information on our website, and we will continue these. We also have a grief retreat coming up in July, just like you talked about, because of that stigma and shame. Families that have lost loved ones, especially children, to substance use disorder, there is a special kind of grief that comes with that, because people do not understand addiction, and because some people shy away from that. Those parents do not receive the same type of support as if their child had died in an accident or from, let's just say, cancer. So we offer a grief retreat every year, and to give those parents a special time with therapists to work through grief issues and to begin to let that healing process begin.
Yeah.
And so I encourage families that are in need of that, or if you know somebody that have lost somebody, please reach out and let them know that this is available.
And they can do that on your website.
Yes, sir.
Recently, Alabama has enacted legislation that will provide for the medical use of cannabis in our state. And it's highly regulated. and it's very restricted, and it's probably at least a year out before, and it's sort of like building a house, you know, it takes longer and costs more, but marijuana, even though it's Schedule One, it is recognized in at least 40 states as being legal. How do you address that with these young people, particularly, to get them to understand that there's a big gap between cannabis, opioids, heroin, fentanyl? Do you address it? You talk about it, I'm sure.
Absolutely. That is, in fact, I would say that's one of the topics that we're being requested to talk about more and more in schools. So we're doing a lot of conversation. One of our struggles is the perception of risk around marijuana has really dropped. So a lot of education on our part and education around the potency of marijuana. The potency has gone up so much that when students use it early, it really can have a negative impact on their brain and can be as substantial as other drugs. So our part is about education and being honest with students, not trying to scare them, no scare tactics. This is just honest information so that they can make really good choices as they go out in the world and in their families. So it is an issue for us around the student population.
Well, thank you for being with us. Thank you for what you do. This is Our Issues Birmingham. Thanks for being with us.